The first time I saw the fence, it wasn't just wood and nails. It was an insult 8 feet tall, stretching across the gravel road my grandfather carved out of mesquite scrub with his own 2 hands. A road he swore would never turn anyone away, least of all his family. It was dawn, pale gold spilling over the pastures, the air heavy with that warm Texas smell of dust and cattle. My old Ford rattled along like it always did, mug of black coffee sloshing in the holder I'd welded to the dash. I just hauled back 30 head of black Angus from auction, a trailer full of restless animals humming like thunder behind me. Then I rounded the bend and hit the brakes, so hard the coffee went flying. The road stopped dead, and there it was. Brand new cedar boards, still raw, still sharp with the scent of money spent for spite. A sign bolted to the planks declared in perfect block letters, "Private Road, Willowbrook Estates Residents Only." I sat there a moment, staring through the windshield, letting the anger sink in slow. You don't grow up ranching without learning to control your temper. Cattle can smell it same as people can, but there's a special kind of fury that rises when someone lays claim to what's yours. Sarah pulled up behind me in her vet truck, window down, hair pinned back from the morning rounds. "What in God's name is this?" she asked, voice tight. "A mistake," I said, climbing out. "A real expensive mistake." The woman responsible was already waiting on the other side of that fence. Vivian Blackwood, HOA president of Willowbrook Estates. Pearl white BMW parked in the dust like a swan that hated getting its feet dirty. She wore designer sunglasses at 6:30 in the morning, clipboard tucked under one arm like it was a sword. "Good morning, Mr. Thornfield," she called, smiling in that way people do when they're hoping you'll hit them so they can sue you. "Security upgrade. Nothing personal. You'll need to find an alternate way to your property from now on." My jaw tightened. I looked past her to the subdivision that had sprouted on the edge of our land like mold on bread. Identical rooftops, perfect lawns, not a speck of dirt on the driveways. I thought of my grandfather's hands, scarred and calloused from laying this road stone by stone. Neighbors helping neighbors, no lawyers, no clipboards. "Vivian," I said, calm as I could manage, "you're standing on my family's easement. This road isn't yours to close." Her smile didn't waver, but I saw the little twitch at the corner of her mouth. "The community voted," she replied, smooth as glass. "Times change, Ezra. Progress requires adjustment." Behind me, the cattle shifted uneasily in the trailer, hooves thudding. Every delay cost money, cost weight, cost peace of mind. I thought of my 2 kids at college, both talking about whether to come back to the ranch after graduation, and I thought of what this place would look like if people like Vivian won. I didn't raise my voice, didn't slam the fence with my fist. Just took off my hat, brushed the dust off, and looked her straight in the eye. "You just picked a fight with the wrong family." Sarah caught my glance and didn't say a word. After 23 years of marriage, she knew what came next. I was heading straight to Garrett Mills, old friend, property lawyer, and the meanest son of a gun to ever wear cowboy boots in a courtroom. But in that moment, standing in the rising sun with the smell of cedar and diesel in my nose, I promised myself something. This wasn't just going to be about tearing down a fence. This was going to be about making sure no one, no HOA, no smug neighbor with a law degree, ever tried to fence off a Thornfield again. And when it was over, they wouldn't just regret putting that sign up. They'd pay for it. 2 days after the fence went up, the mailbox at the end of our drive looked like it had been fed steroids. A neat stack of cream-colored envelopes, all stamped with the Willowbrook Estates tree logo, waited inside like coiled snakes. Sarah opened one, skimmed the letter, and snorted. "Violation notice. Odor complaints from livestock operations." She pulled another. "Noise from agricultural equipment before 7 a.m. A third. Unsightly machinery visible from public thoroughfare." She held them all up with a bitter smile. "They're trying to paper us into submission." "Good kindling," I said, tossing the letters straight into the wood stove. But the smirk I wore didn't reach my eyes. Harassment wasn't new in ranching, but this felt different, organized, personal. At first I tried to shrug it off. Ranchers have work to do. Calves to doctor, hay to move, fences to mend. But every morning brought something new. Anonymous calls to Sarah's veterinary practice, questioning her license. Strange SUVs parked at the property line with men inside, snapping photos. My feed supplier called, nervous. Ezra, someone says you're behind on payments. I told them you've never missed a bill in 15 years. But who are these people? I knew exactly who they were. Vivian Blackwood wasn't just running an HOA. She was running a campaign. Slow poison instead of a bullet. One night, over leftover pot roast, Sarah slid a business card across the table. Rodriguez, County Planning Office. Fences over 6 feet need permits. She gave me that quiet, dangerous smile I've learned to respect. Let's see if our new neighbors follow the rules they're so fond of quoting. Turns out they hadn't. By the end of the week, a county inspector with a badge and a clipboard was standing at Vivian's precious fence, shaking his head. No permits. Blocking a recorded easement. Ma'am, this is a problem. He tacked a bright orange stop work order to the boards while I leaned against my truck, sipping coffee and doing my best not to grin. But Vivian didn't back off. She doubled down. Her Dallas lawyer sent me a letter claiming our easement had expired from non-use, as if 60 years of hauling hay and cattle meant nothing. Then came the insult. An offer to let us apply for daily access permits at $25 each, submitted 72 hours in advance. In other words, I need Vivian's permission to drive to my own barn. I read the letter twice, set it down gently, and told Sarah, over my dead body. That same week, my ranch hand Miguel wrecked his truck on a rocky detour we'd been forced to use. Back injury, surgery, weeks off the job. Standing in a hospital waiting room, I felt the anger coil tighter in my chest. This wasn't just inconvenience anymore, it was danger. Word spread fast in Millbrook County. By Saturday's sunrise, 23 pickups idled at the end of Cottonwood Creek Road, diesel engines rumbling like thunder. Neighbors, friends, cattlemen, all there without me asking. Educational convoy. Old Sheriff Patterson called it with a wink. They drove past Willowbrook in single file, air horns blaring at 6:15 sharp. Vivian called the sheriff screaming about noise terrorism. Patterson told her, deadpan, honking ain't illegal. Buy better windows. Sarah started working her own angle. Late nights at the kitchen table, laptop glowing, papers scattered like autumn leaves. Federal agricultural improvement grants, she murmured one evening. Your granddad mentioned getting help in the 60s, didn't he? I shrugged. Something about gravel money. Not just gravel. She slid a photocopy toward me, a faded document stamped with a federal seal. These grants required permanent open access for agricultural vehicles. Violated, and they have to repay the full amount with 40 years of interest. I whistled low. How much? Sarah tapped her phone calculator. $340,000. Minimum. For the first time since this started, I smiled without forcing it. This wasn't going to end with a polite handshake. Vivian thought she was tightening the screws. She didn't know we were building a case nail by nail, brick by brick, same way my grandfather built this road. The fence wasn't just an inconvenience anymore. It was a noose, and she'd tied the knot herself. The courthouse records room smelled like old paper and dust, the kind of place where secrets sit patiently, waiting for someone stubborn enough to dig them out. Sarah's the one with that kind of patience. I've seen her pull a calf at 3 in the morning with nothing but a flashlight and grit. Watching her comb through decades of deed books was no different. 2 hours in, her voice cut through the hum of the flickering lights. Ezra, she whispered, tapping a yellow document with one finger. Your granddad didn't just build that road himself. He built it with a federal agricultural grant. I leaned over her shoulder, tracing the faded ink. So, she said, eyes flashing, blocking access violates federal law. They could be forced to repay the grant, with 40 years of compounded interest. She ran the math on her phone. 340 grand. Minimum. That was the first crack of real sunlight in weeks. But it wasn't the only discovery Sarah made. Later that night, while I was patching a busted gate, she came out with her laptop under one arm and that tight, dangerous smile she gets when she's onto something. Vivian Blackwood, she said. Guess what I found? She's a disbarred lawyer. California yanked her license in 2018 for embezzling from an elderly client. I wiped sweat off my forehead with my sleeve. You're kidding. She moved to Texas, got new credentials under her married name. But the criminal conviction's still there. And Texas law requires HOA officers to disclose any felony history. Sarah's voice was calm, but I could hear the anger simmering. She didn't, which means she's been breaking the law since day one. The weight of it hit me slowly, like a rainstorm rolling in. We didn't just have an illegal fence on our road. We had a crook leading the charge, and she was desperate enough to do anything. That desperation showed itself a week later. It was close to midnight when I woke to the sound of cattle bawling, panicked and hoarse. I grabbed a flashlight, shoved on my boots, and ran for the pens. The water tanks were bone dry, hoses slashed clean through. 30 head of thirsty cattle stamping and kicking in the August heat. Not just costly, but deadly. The security cameras told the rest. Infrared footage of a figure in dark clothes near the fence line, bolt cutters flashing in the beam. Sheriff Patterson's deputies pulled clear fingerprints from the tool, and the match came back faster than I expected. Vivian Blackwood, standing there in the pre-dawn haze, watching deputies bag evidence. I felt something shift inside me. Anger wasn't enough anymore. This wasn't just a petty property squabble. This was sabotage, bordering on criminal cruelty. By morning, the sheriff had filed charges. Destruction of property. Interference with livestock operations. In Texas, that's no slap on the wrist. But Vivian wasn't done. Anonymous letters flooded Sarah's vet clients, claiming she ran an unsafe practice. A feed supplier called to say someone was spreading rumors about her credit. And the bank, conveniently connected to Vivian's brother-in-law, demanded early payment on an equipment loan I'd never missed. I sold 12 head of prime cattle just to make the deadline. Watching them load onto a stranger's trailer, I felt like I was selling pieces of my grandfather's legacy. That night, sitting on the porch with Sarah, I looked out across the pastures glowing under the moonlight and made a decision. No more playing defense. No more waiting for the next dirty trick. We're not just fighting for the ranch anymore, I said. We're fighting for every farmer, every rancher who's ever had to bow to people like her. Sarah didn't answer right away. She just reached over, took my hand, and squeezed. In her other hand was a thick file, copies of Vivian's financial records, courtesy of our lawyer Garrett. Debts stacked to the ceiling, foreclosure breathing down her neck. She's cornered. Ezra, Sarah said quietly. And cornered people do stupid things. I stared out into the darkness, past the road my grandfather built, past the line of that cursed fence, and felt resolve settle in my bones like steel. We weren't just going to win. We were going to expose her. By September, the fight had stopped being local gossip and turned into a full-blown war. Garrett's office became our command post. Every square inch of his mahogany desk was covered with maps, easement records, wetland surveys, and a thick folder labeled Blackwood, personal and financial. Garrett liked to tap that folder whenever he got excited. She's cracking, Ezra. She's leveraged to the eyeballs. One wrong move, and her whole empire caves in. I nodded, but I didn't feel much like celebrating. Because every time Vivian slipped, she struck back harder. First came the private security detail, 2 rent-a-cops parked at the end of our drive, cameras rolling, documenting every truckload of hay and every vet visit like we were running contraband instead of cattle. Then came the smear campaign. Sarah's veterinary clients started getting anonymous calls. Dr. Thornfield isn't following sanitary protocols. One woman even canceled her dog's surgery out of fear. Sarah held her chin high, but I could see the hurt in her eyes at night. We'd built her practice on trust, seeing that trust poison cut deeper than any fence. I can handle it, she said quietly, typing up a response to the state licensing board. But Ezra, this isn't just legal anymore. This is personal. She wasn't wrong. The sabotage didn't stop with our cattle tanks. One morning we woke to find dead fish floating in Cottonwood Creek downstream from our land. An obvious plant, saltwater species dumped overnight to make it look like runoff contamination. The state environmental inspector laughed when she saw them. Sir, these are red snapper. You're 50 miles from the Gulf. Whoever staged this doesn't even know freshwater from salt. That bit of comic relief didn't make me feel safer. If Vivian was desperate enough to frame us with dead fish, what was next? The answer came 2 weeks later in the form of a thick envelope from First National Bank. Immediate payment required, $60,000 due in 30 days. Turns out Vivian's brother-in-law worked in loan servicing. I sold 12 head of prime cattle at a loss to meet the deadline, feeling like I was carving up my family history piece by piece. Sarah found me in the barn that night, staring at the empty stalls. "How much more can we take?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away. I was thinking about my grandfather's calloused hands, about Miguel recovering from back surgery, about our 2 kids who'd grown up riding this land and might not inherit it if we lost. "No more playing nice," I said finally. Time to hit back. The plan came together fast. Garrett filed complaints on every front, federal, state, and county. The wetland survey showed Vivian's fence blocked natural drainage, risking flood damage, EPA violation. The easement grant paperwork proved federal law guaranteed our access, Treasury violation. And Texas statutes made her failure to disclose her felony conviction an open and shut case of HOA fraud. Meanwhile, Sarah rallied allies. The Texas Cattlemen's Association pledged $15,000 to our legal fund. The Farm Bureau added another 10. Our neighbors organized a Ranch Heritage Day to show the community who we really were, not villains, not polluters, but stewards of the land. Vivian, cornered, lashed out harder. Digital forensics traced fake social media accounts, smearing our ranch right back to her home internet. Strange trucks prowled our fence line at night, cameras flashing. Sheriff Patterson posted deputies nearby, but even he admitted, cornered critters are the meanest ones. Through it all, Sarah stayed calm in public, but I saw her shoulders tighten each time our phone rang after midnight. Threats about our kids. Rumors about immigration raids on our ranch hands. Even our feed supplier got anonymous letters warning, doing business with the Thornfields will cost you. One evening, Sarah slammed her laptop shut and looked at me with tears of pure anger. This isn't just harassment anymore. It's hate. I sat beside her, taking her hand. Then we ended. All of it. Garrett called the next morning. His paralegal had found the smoking gun, the original Willowbrook development permit, buried in the county files. It explicitly forbade interference with existing agricultural operations. Violate it, and the entire subdivision's occupancy certificates could be revoked. For a long moment, I just sat there, holding the phone, staring out at the dusty horizon. We didn't just have leverage. We had the power to end this fight in one move. But there was a cost. "Ezra," Garrett said, his voice low, "push this button and every homeowner in Willowbrook could be forced out. Families. Kids. People who had no part in this." That night on the porch, I told Sarah everything. The sunset burned gold across the pastures, and for once the road was quiet. "If we pull this trigger," I said, "we win. But we scorch the earth while we're at it." Sarah looked at me, eyes steady. "So what kind of victory do you want?" The question hung between us like Texas heat. Heavy, inescapable. I woke to cattle bawling, the kind of sound that rips you out of bed before your mind even catches up. I grabbed my boots, flashlight, and shotgun, heart pounding as I tore across the yard. The water tanks were bone dry again, hoses cut clean through. 30 head of thirsty cattle pressed against the rails, wild-eyed in the August heat. The cameras told the rest. A lone figure in dark clothes near the fence line, bolt cutters glinting under infrared. When the deputies arrived, Patterson didn't bother hiding his disgust. "Prince match," he said, holding up an evidence bag. "It's Vivian." Something inside me went cold. Not angry cold, like winter in the middle of Texas summer. This wasn't politics or petty HOA nonsense anymore. This was criminal, calculated cruelty. By dawn, Patterson had filed charges: destruction of property, interference with livestock operations. In Texas, that's no slap on the wrist. It's a felony with teeth. But Vivian still wouldn't stop. Flyers accusing Sarah of malpractice showed up around town. Someone called the bank, again, pushing them to review our loans. A message scrawled across our mailbox in red paint: sell or suffer. 2 days later, Garrett called. "We've got her cornered, Ezra. The development permit. The easement. The federal grant. We can end this now, but it's nuclear. County can revoke every occupancy certificate in Willowbrook. One vote from a judge, and 127 families are homeless. I sat in silence, phone heavy in my hand. For months, I dreamed of tearing that fence down plank by plank, watching Vivian eat every smug word she'd ever spoken. But the picture in my head wasn't her. It was the kids in those houses, riding bikes on driveways their parents barely afforded. They hadn't built this fight. She had. That night on the porch, Sarah sat beside me, file folders stacked high on the table. The cicadas buzzed loud in the trees. "So what do we do?" she asked softly. I stared at the dark line of cedar boards cutting our land in two. "We show her what real neighbors look like," I said finally. "We end this without burning down the whole subdivision." The next morning, Garrett delivered our terms. Either the HOA removed the fence and paid restitution, or we'd expose everything: Vivian's felony record, the illegal fence, the fraud, the development permit clause. For 48 hours, Vivian didn't blink. Then she snapped. It was 5:30 a.m. when the black SUVs rolled into Willowbrook. FBI jackets poured out like ants from a hill, hauling evidence boxes from Vivian's house. Neighbors peered through curtains as their HOA president stood handcuffed in silk pajamas on her perfect lawn. Sarah and I watched the live footage from Garrett's office, not cheering, not gloating, just quiet. By noon, Vivian faced a federal indictment: wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, practicing law without a license, sabotage of agricultural operations. Patterson called later with a grim chuckle. "Never seen a suburban lawyer look so small, Ezra. They've got her on everything from bank fraud to animal cruelty." The new HOA board called an emergency meeting that night. In a packed community hall, under buzzing fluorescent lights, they read their apology into the record. The fence would come down, restitution paid, legal fees covered. But the moment that burned itself into my memory wasn't the apology. It was Miguel, my ranch hand, still stiff from back surgery, standing in front of those homeowners, voice steady. All I ever wanted was to do my job without getting hurt. This fence didn't just block a road. It blocked decency. No one said a word. When they handed me the settlement documents, $275,000 plus every penny of legal costs, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt done. The fight that had eaten up our lives for months was finally over. The next morning, I swung the first sledgehammer into Vivian's fence myself. The cedar cracked, sharp and loud in the still air, like a gunshot announcing the end of a long war. Sarah stood beside me, tears on her cheeks, as the neighbors cheered and cameras rolled. But I wasn't thinking about the crowd. I was thinking about my grandfather's road, open again, stretching straight into the horizon, the way it was always meant to be. 6 months later, the road looks the way it should have all along: open, quiet, honest. A strip of gravel through mesquite and pasture, carrying the smell of cedar and diesel, carrying history in every stone my grandfather laid by hand. The fence is gone, not a splinter left. Where it stood, the grass has already begun to grow back, soft and green like a wound healing from the inside out. Life on the ranch has a way of moving forward whether you're ready or not. The cattle still need water. The hay still needs cutting. And the sun still rises over Cottonwood Creek Road, pouring gold across the fields like nothing bad ever happened here. But things are different now. Sarah's veterinary practice is busier than ever. Clients who once hesitated to drive down our road now bring coffee and pie, shaking her hand like she's some kind of local hero. Miguel's back on his feet, stubborn as ever, swearing he'll work twice as hard to make up for lost time. The settlement money sits in a trust we barely touch. We used a piece of it to put up a smart gate at the ranch entrance, not to keep people out, but to document who comes and goes, a quiet reminder that vigilance is part of stewardship. The rest funds scholarships for local kids who want to study agriculture or environmental law. I figure if our fight taught us anything, it's that good fences might make good neighbors, but good knowledge makes better defenders. Willowbrook surprised me. The families who live there, the ones who watch this fight from behind curtains, wondering what to believe, came out to the ranch one Saturday. No cameras, no speeches. Just kids feeding calves, parents asking questions about rotational grazing and clean water. Turns out, when you take fear out of the equation, people see the land for what it is, not an obstacle, not a development site, but a piece of Texas worth protecting. Vivian's gone. Federal prison for 18 months, restitution to more victims than I can count. Her name turned into a cautionary tale whispered at HOA meetings across the state. I don't celebrate it. Watching someone destroy themselves up close isn't satisfying. It's just sad. But her fall gave something back to this county, perspective. Folks talk about heritage like it's just an old photograph on the wall. They forget it's alive. It's roads and fences, cattle and feed, neighbors who show up at 6 in the morning with horns blaring because you're in trouble. It's not nostalgia. It's a living thing you tend like pasture grass, or it dies. The county commissioner signed an ordinance protecting established agricultural operations from harassment. Garrett calls it the Thornfield Standard. I call it common sense written down. And Sarah, God bless her, has turned our fight into education. Heritage ranch tours, weekend workshops, kids learning how to bottle feed calves and read a water table. The other evening, just before sunset, my daughter sat beside me on the porch, home from college for the first time in months. She looked out across the pastures and said, "Dad, I want to come back here after graduation. Help run things. Keep it going." I didn't say anything for a while. Just watched the sun melt into the horizon, same way it has for 60 years, and felt my throat tighten. My son's thinking the same. For a while I was scared this place would die with me. Now I'm starting to believe it might outlive all of us. Sometimes I walk the road at dusk, gravel crunching under my boots, wind rustling the grass where that fence once stood. The quiet feels different now. Not fragile, not fearful, just steady. Granddad said this road would serve the community forever. He was right, but he didn't know it would serve as a reminder, too, that some things aren't for sale, not at any price. The sky over Millbrook turns the color of burnished copper as I reach the end of the drive. I stop, tip my hat to the horizon, and smile. The road is open, and it always will be,